Hey, Soraya, how's it going?
Hey Jeff, hectic as always, but hey,
Yes.
what are
Wouldn't
you
want,
gonna do? It's
yeah,
that time of year.
wouldn't want it any different.
Never.
Yeah, I kind of broke our rule, Soraya. We have a
What'd you do?
rule, no Christmas decorations until after Thanksgiving, but we had our grandkids here and we put them up last night, what, a month and a half early. Or I should say about 3 weeks earlier than we normally do, but yeah, so I'm one of those guys this year, and I'm really strict about not putting it up until after Thanksgiving. But we wanted to share that time with our grandchildren while they were here. So
Hey, free labor.
yeah, that too, that too. Yeah.
But
Somebody
I'm
needs
sure it was nice and sweet and a good time with family. So,
absolutely, absolutely.
Jeff, we've been kind of in a loop of just kind of reading stuff, listening to new stuff. Why don't you tell our listeners who will be joining us today?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this, Soraya. We have return guest Dan Epstein, who we had on, I believe it's episode 58 or 56,
Yeah.
our biggest episode when we covered Jupiter Effect.
Ooh,
Yeah, Dan played on some of those early Jupiter Effect albums, including one of my favorites of all time, The Instructions of the Two Ways of Becoming Alice. I think I got the title right. But Dan authored. We don't have the book yet, Soraya, but by the time this episode airs, the book will be in people's hands. But
yes.
um, now you're one of us. So the Red Cross story. So we talked with Andrew Reich about the documentary, but today we're talking to Dan about his book, which we've all read and we love.
Yes. I think this is going to be a fun discussion, and fans of Red Cross will definitely be enjoying the book. And those of you who maybe aren't as familiar with Red Cross, like myself, like I like the music, but I don't know too much about the story. I really enjoyed the book, and I'm looking forward to this discussion and also joining us, as always, are, the infamous fifth Beatle, right? To us. Um, the amazing Ronnie Barnett,
The heart of our show.
uh, who uh, you know, always makes all discussions a lot more fun. So,
Indeed.
Jeff, I say we jump into it.
Let's do it. All right.
Hi, this is Soraya.
And this is Jeff,
Our podcast is called Paisley Stage Raspberry and Rhyme.
a podcast where the two of us play music that we like and share anecdotes and background about the tunes.
We hope you'll join our conversation. And without further ado, a grooviar.
Let's get groovy.
Awesome.
Yep.
All right, Soraya. So we should get started. Here we are on episode 202 of Paisley Stage Raspberry and Rhyme. And yes, hey, you got a hard copy. This is what we got
Yeah.
at the
An actual,
moment.
Well, I'm the author, so
Privileges.
Yeah.
yeah.
We'll talk about that in a bit, which
Yes.
by the time this gets posted, hopefully that all resolved. But Soraya, speaking about the author, Dan Epstein, author of Now You're One of Us, the incredible story of Red Cross. And Dan, you've authored other books before and written lots about music, lots about sports, Big Hair and Plastic Grass,
Yeah.
Stars and
Incredible.
Stripes,
Yep.
co-authored Captain and Me, right?
Right, with Ron Bloomberg.
But as far as uh, books about music, I know you've written lots about music, but is this your first book?
Kinda, yeah. I mean, I'd worked on a book that came out a few years ago called Stomp Box, which is about guitar pedals and filled with interviews with various guitarists and bassists who use various pedals. But this is the first project that's like specifically devoted to a specific artist, and I think actually, jumping in here, like when I first started talking with Jeff and Steven about doing this Red Cross book, I think they were a little puzzled. Like, why is this guy who writes baseball books want to do our book? And then on top of that, the fact that most of my all of my baseball books had been about the 1970s, I think they were a little leery about that because the 70s obviously a huge influence on Red Cross, but they definitely went through that period in their career where like that was all anyone was talking about. It was like, oh, they're kitschy 70s guys and they wear bell bottoms and, and like they really, I had to explain to them that like my view of the 70s was, as much about like, you know, not smeared brown corduroy,
Mm.
and just like, the recession and, there's a lot of ugliness and not kitschiness to the 70s that I really relate to, having been a child of them myself. And I think that was one of the things that they were like, oh, okay, you're
Uh,
you're not just gonna like, want to talk about bell bottoms with us.
Yeah, like that. Like at the end of the book, Jeff mentions the AI write a Red Cross song, and that's exactly what they.
I know. I love that because that literally, he mentioned that in literally the last conversation we had for the book, and I was just like, oh man, that is so poetic, and yes, we have to end it with that.
that's hilarious. So,
Yeah. So is your idea, Dan, to do the book?
Yes and no. Here's what happened. I had done an interview with Stephen for Flood magazine in the spring of 2022, around the 35th anniversary of the Neurotica reissue, or the 35th anniversary reissue of Neurotica. And we'd had a really good interview, and but Lee Sobel, who's a book agent that I've worked with on a couple of projects that never came to fruition, a couple of attempted music projects in the past, he rang me up and was like, "Do you think Stephen would want to do a book?" And it was like, that was a really good interview. He's a really interesting guy. I was like, yeah, but I kind of think it would be a package deal, like I don't. It was hard. Like Steven's a really interesting guy in and of himself, and has an interesting non-Red Cross career or extra Red Cross career, as the case may be. But it's like the story is really him and Jeff, and we had no idea. I don't know what planet we were on, but like we were completely unaware that Andrew Reich was in the process of making a documentary about the guys at the time. So when Lee reached out to Stephen at first about this, Stephen was like, yeah, well, we've just finished doing interviews for this documentary. And then he put us in touch with Andrew. Andrew very generously shared a very early edit of the documentary with us, as well as some of the transcripts of like the 70s era interview topics, that in early 80s topics that he'd done with various interview subjects. And it all kind of came together from there. I mean, it was pretty clear, like, yes, we should, and I can't remember exactly the order that everything happened, but it was basically like we had a couple of Zoom calls with Stephen and Jeff, and, they kind of seemed a little reluctant at first, but then came around to it. I think their experience, working with Andrew on the documentary was like the timing was really good because they had been in the headspace of thinking about their lives and careers and the career of the band. But at the same time, I think there were also things about that experience that didn't sit particularly well with them, and primarily because Andrew had the final say on what went into the documentary and what didn't, which is the way documentaries work, and they understood that. But I think there were a few things that Stephen in particularly felt like were glossed over, or not enough time spent on, or not no time at all spent on, to kind of move the thing along. And so when I told them, like, well, this is your project, everything that goes in here is because you want it in there. Anything that we leave out, like, it's because you want to leave it out. However, said there may be some things that you're reluctant to put in, and I think are really important that we do include. And I'll be on your ass about that. But other than that, this is ultimately your deal, and your names are going to be on it. And the other thing about that kind of early gestation period, I guess, is that watching Born Innocent, Andrew's documentary, or watching the early cut, made it really obvious to me what I wanted to do with the book, which is that I wanted it to be Jeff and Stephen telling their story almost exclusively, with the occasionally me popping in as the narrator to kind of move things along, give things context, etc. But other than that, it was all them, because I really, I understand why in the documentary there have to be a lot of other people going, people more famous than Jeff and Steven going, these guys should have been big. But that's not, I didn't want the book to be the book version of the movie.
Mhm.
I wanted it to be something else. And I wanted it, and, every time I would, and I said this as much to Andrew, like every time I saw those guys on screen, whether together or separately, and then it would cut away from them, I'd be like, I wanted more of that. Like, more, of whatever. And they're so funny. I mean, you guys know. I mean, they're so they have stories for days. They riff, on all kinds of shit very easily. They're so articulate. They're so sharp. It's just like that. It was it. What am I trying to say? It was no effort at all. The pulling the stuff out of them was no effort. The where the effort came in for me really was trying to figure out, how to layer it all together to, make a readable story. What stuff, I thought there were things that I thought were funny that ultimately, like, we're just spending too much time in 1986 or whatever, and like we have to move on. So that's where the real hard work came in for me. For, as far as interviewing those guys, I mean, there is a period of probably 9 months where I was talking on the phone individually with them every day, or I'm sorry, like once every week or so. And those conversations were almost without question the highlights of my week.
Oh, nice. So so when you decided to have mainly the story, well, really the story told from them two rather than a bunch of other people. So it's an oral history, right? You would say
Yes.
it's an oral history.
But
So
we don't have to look up a glossary every time we see a name to see
Right.
who this person is. It's fantastic.
Excellent point, Ronnie. I had
Yeah.
not considered that, but yes, you're right. Oh yeah, by page 2, you know who Jeff and Steven are, and it's
So you, at that point, you decided that you're gonna have to have these conversations with these guys to get their story. So you set up some kind of schedule to interview these guys, and it's
yeah.
Zoom or phone.
It was phone. Yeah, it was phone pretty much all the time. I think that worked better for them. And it was always individually,
Oh,
because I sensed, both because I've interviewed them together before and because, I saw it on screen. When you get the two of them in the room together, the old brotherly dynamics kick in. Like, I mean, there's just no way around it. And Jeff always like comes in with the big brother energy, telling Steven he's wrong or he's misremembering, or, and so and as I told them when we were in discussion about this, I said, I have a younger sister, younger by 2 years. We're the only kids. I spent a good part of our childhood laying down that big brother energy as well. Like, anytime any attention was focused on her, I'd step into the camera, and so I totally get where they're both coming from. And so I just thought, like, let them both tell their stories, the big story and then their individual stories, without worrying about the other one stepping in and going, hey, wait a minute, no, or you're crazy or whatever. And, I would go back to each one of them and be like, Stephen, Jeff says this. What's your take on it? Jeff, Stephen said you were doing this. What's your perspective? And, and it became clear to me pretty early, like, they don't remember a lot of things the same way, and but that's okay because that's a very human thing, and it's like the Rashomon syndrome, and like they're gonna, but like both of their perspectives are equally valid, and I thought like at some point rather than trying to like square the circle, like let's just put both their takes on it in there, and you the reader can decide like does this sound like bullshit to me, or like is one of them lying, or are both of them just naturally coming at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, different perspectives. That's what I was thinking too. I wanted to ask Ronnie and Soraya this, since we interviewed Andrew last week, and we've got this fresh perspective on the documentary and the book. And Andrew was letting us know that his thought pattern in making the documentary was that he wanted it to be something that anybody could watch and enjoy, regardless of what level of knowledge you had from the band. For
Sure.
me, reading the book, I feel like the book is more in depth. Obviously, it's a book, so usually the books are, from what I'm told.
Hopefully.
Jeff doesn't read too many.
I don't
So
read too much,
yeah.
but I found out that my new thing is advanced PDF copies. I can nail those. But if I'm anyways, so I was wondering for you guys, do you feel like this book is like more in depth? So you get a lot more from the book than you do from the documentary, and I think that's the way it was intended. Do you guys feel like there's
Yeah,
a lot more here?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're asking these guys. I'll,
Yeah.
I'll shut up for
Yeah.
a second.
No. Well, I just want to say it's like last time we pointed out with Andrew, like Soraya doesn't know a lot about the band. Jeff, you know a bit about the band, and I know a whole lot about the band. And the book, like the movie, appeals to all. I think I can speak for all of us. Soraya, you can speak too. But like the movie, it appeals to all of us. It works for everybody. Like there's stuff I didn't know. Also, Dan, I talked to Roy, who finished the book, who said to tell you that he loved the book and thank
Oh,
you. And he learned stuff he didn't know. We all learned stuff we didn't know. So
that makes me feel good because, like, well, I specifically, you know, like I said, I wanted this to be Jeff and Steven's story. I felt bad about not talking to Roy or to Robert. Not because I didn't want their perspective to muddy it up. And of course, if you talk to two members, you have to talk to 12 former members or whatever.
Right.
But like obviously, like Roy and Robert, like they were part of the Neurotica lineup, which is where I first came in, and so like there was it's like very early in my journalism career, I went to interview Pete Shelley before a
That's right.
Buzzcocks show, and Steve Diggle showed up, and I had to tell him like this was supposed to be just a one-on-one interview because of the format, and I felt so and he didn't give a shit, but I felt shitty because like no, I would all things being equal, I would like you to be here. I would like your voice in this, so that makes me really happy that Roy dug it.
Yeah. Sorry, Soraya, go ahead.
No, all I was going to say is I saw the documentary before coming to the book. And Dan, I want to thank you for what you did, which was the documentary. I had the same reaction where I go, wait, but wait, can you expand on that? And the book really expanded the story for me. And I'm coming from a place of very minimal knowledge about the history of the band. So I want to thank you for that.
Well,
Because
thank
the
you for.
story's so compelling and you gave us so much detail, but really thanks to your conversations with Jeff and Steven, because
Well, right on. I mean, the thing is, like Steven, I know, he was really thinking of it more as like, like this is, this book is for the hardcore fan. Like we go in depth on all the records. We go, talk about the Love Dolls films, and for me, as a longtime, hardcore Red Cross fan, this was a joy because I could ask them any question I ever wanted to, anything and why did you mention so and so in the liner notes to
Yeah.
Born Innocent? It's just like like I could go there and they would have to answer me, and that's just from a fan's perspective, that was really awesome. But it also, like I said, Stephen thought of this as, and I know he said in some early interviews, like the the movie is for the casual fan, the book is for the hardcore fan. But I really feel like, and using the very what's the term? Not exactly scientific, but basically, my girlfriend, who knew nothing about Red Cross, read uh, uh, like an early version of the manuscript, like before the first edit, and she became obsessed with the band after reading the manuscript. And so, I feel like there are so many themes in here that you don't have to know a note of their music to kind of get roped in. The brotherly connection, the sort of feral Gen X children in the early '70s, the LA being sort of tangentially parts of these music scenes, but also not being part of it. I mean, there's something that also really hit me, back to the Gen X thing when we were working on this, was like, I feel like the Red Cross story kind of encapsulates Gen X in a way that we don't talk about. Like, we talk about, oh, Gen X and music, oh, Nirvana and angst, teenage angst, and like all this stuff that gets carried with us into adulthood. But there is also, like, there's something about our generation where it's like, we're all these, like, hopefully a lot of us at least are these very smart kids who were completely just like absorbed all elements of the pop culture as they were like swirling around us, and we were filled with ideas, and we had all these like grandiose concepts that we artistically, and like the actual follow through on it was by and large terrible. And often as not, we would completely shoot ourselves in the foot. And you get that in so many Red Cross stories where it's just like they've got these great ideas, they're, firing on all cylinders, and then they do something that completely screws it up for themselves, or the timing doesn't work out, and but it's just like almost like this potential of this entire generation would just I don't want to say it was wasted, but I want to say had a severe lack of focus,
Mm.
and perhaps suffered tremendously as a result.
Ronnie, were you going to say something?
No,
Always.
Dan just dropped a whole
Yeah.
lot of knowledge
Way
here.
to take that in. It's incredible. No, you're right. I mean, I'm not surprised that your girlfriend or anybody would pick up this book, start reading it, and just immediately fall in love with the characters. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
they are
They're
characters.
so cool, and you're totally
Yeah.
right, Dan. It's a story. It's not just about, oh, we wrote and it's got the hits, for this reason. It's about, yeah, it's wonderful.
And also about perseverance and just like doing your thing, whether or not the world tells you, reinforces that that's what you're supposed to be doing. It's like, obviously they took a lengthy hiatus, but they never really stopped making music. They never really stopped. It's not like, Jeff and Steven, did an Everly Brothers where they stopped talking to each other for decades. It's like they were is still like hanging out every weekend or whatever, but it was just like, these creative relationships, creativity in general, it goes through these evolutions, and so then to come out the other end, and 45 years later they're doing the Red album, which is, I think quite possibly the best record they've ever done, and that is just such an uplifting thing where it's like and it's not on a major label, it's not on,
Yeah.
it's not selling millions of copies, but they still have a very hardcore fan base that is eating it up, and Quite rightly so. It's a fantastic record.
It
Yeah,
is.
yeah. No, and they've been on tour for like 6 months at this
Yeah.
point, which
There
is
was
incredible at any age, but
Mm.
yeah.
I
especially
have
an
a,
older band, if you will.
There was a
I have a
couple of
question,
things.
Dan.
Oh, go ahead.
Sure, sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask because the book shows these really extensive and in-depth conversations. I mean, I can already picture it. Did you find or did you notice that there were some topics that just were off the table? They really didn't want to delve into it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think some of it comes back to very different them being very different people. I don't feel like there was anything that Stephen didn't want to talk about. There were
Okay.
some things that he was like, maybe we shouldn't go too hard on that, or maybe this is just me being neurotic, and let's dial this down a bit. I mean, like I don't think I'm talking out of school here, but we had three different interviews, just me and Steven, about Third Eye. Like he's still working through a lot of stuff about Third Eye, and of course I wasn't going to be able to fit all that in, and I think he feels conflicted about having conflicted feelings about that record because there are so many people who like love that record passionately, like yeah, and
Yeah.
like a really good friend of mine is just like, man, Third Eye, that's where I came in, and like that's still the record I go back to. And like I told Steven that, and he's like, I feel bad because I don't want to put your friend down and I don't want to bum him out by saying how much like that record still bugs me. But so with Steven, I think it was more like, we would have these long conversations, and then the next time he'd be like, maybe we don't need to do that so much. Jeff, I think, is and Steven's a very open person, very thoughtful, very talkative. And Jeff's very thoughtful and talkative too, but Jeff is definitely more insular, keeps a lot more stuff close to the vest. And I mean, for instance, I would just say like Jeff or Stephen and I talked a lot about his relationship with Sofia Coppola, and like, which is a very interesting relationship, both just in and of itself, but also like the timing in both of their careers and stuff. And and Jeff, speaking about his own romantic life, was much more just sort of like, well, this happened, and this is where I met Charlotte, and it's just like didn't really want to go too
Mhm.
much into I mean, we talked about Vicky Peterson, obviously, but again, it was just like, you know, she was cool. She put up with me. I don't know how. And then we broke up. And so like, I definitely got the sense like he didn't want to. I mean, there's a funny part in the book where we talk about the song Mess Around,
Yes.
and the line, can't you see monogamy has always been so hard for me,
Yeah.
line of Jeff's. And, and Steven's like, I don't know how much about that line you're going to get out of Jeff. And then, of course, I talked to Jeff, and he's just like, everybody thinks that's like, it's like from my own personal life. It's just a line that came out. And it's just like, okay.
A placeholder. It's just a
Yes,
placeholder.
exactly. So,
But
like,
meanwhile, Steven said that. So
right. So
there's more. Yeah.
right. So, and and Jeff was, I mean, there's a lot of stuff about drugs in the book, but Jeff, understandably, I think mostly because he's embarrassed, I guess I would venture to say, like, he didn't want to go to I mean, he had some really funny 80s rehab stories, so we so we went there. But like, there was definitely, it's clear that there were some points later on in his life where he fell off the wagon, and he really doesn't want to talk about that. And that's, we kind of briefly mentioned it. Stephen brings it up because that's something that still rankles Stephen, but I didn't feel like we had to delve too deep into it. I didn't feel like the book suffers for not going into you know return to rehab or anything like that.
Yeah, that happens in the film too, where Jeff's like,
Right.
"Oh, that's boring," and Steven's like, "It's part of my story, though."
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Right. And so, and that again is why one of the reasons I decided it would be better to interview them separately. And of course, Stephen brought up a certain incident, and I took it to Jeff, because it's like, well, Stephen's saying this. What do you have to say? He's like, that's not how it happened, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, all right, well, both versions go in the book then.
It was only the Seattle show, just that one
Mhm.
show was.
Right. And Stephen's like, it was a whole tour. So
It's funny.
I,
It's funny you mentioned Steven still fixating on Third Eye because they still fixate on Neurotica. Even Roy is like, anytime Neurotica's, I'm like, that's such an amazing record. He's like, it sounds terrible. We need to remix. We need to get Ed Stasium to remix it. But he brought it up to Ed Stasium when we were with him a couple of months ago. It's like,
yeah,
please,
well,
it's a great record, you guys.
it is a great record, and Ronnie, I know you and I are on the same side on this topic. Like, look, if Steven wants to put the time and effort into, because I know they've got the master tapes back. So if Steven wants to hire Ed Stasium to help them, bring out the beef in the sonic beef, great. Knock yourselves out. I'm sure I will listen to it once,
Yeah.
and file it away, and then go back to the original one that has just transfixed me all these decades.
Yeah, no, Dan, yeah, we are on the same page. Everybody, I recommend reading Dan's Substack about the Replacements. Tim, you sum it all up perfectly there.
Thank you.
Yeah. The original is the original. That's the special one to me too. It's fun to hear these things, right? It's fun, but
But it also feels like parlor tricks in a way. Like what happens if we do this? What happens if we do that? What happened? What if a duck sang lead on Neurotica? It's like, yeah, okay, I'll listen to that once, but yeah. Why mess with perfection? I mean, why mess with imperfect perfection or perfect imperfection? Because it's a weird sounding record. I'll give Roy that. I'll give Steven that. I know what they were going for, and they didn't get it. Partly because Tommy Ertley just was not on the same wavelength with them on that. Like, didn't understand why they wanted the guitars to sound like AC/DC and why they wanted the drums to sound like Led Zeppelin. But I just know, like, when that record came out, like, I didn't go like, oh man, this is a cool record, but I wish there was some mid-range on it. It's like,
nobody thought that, except for the band. So one thing that came across to me, Dan, in reading this book is there's several touchstones throughout the book where the band could have ended. It was somebody leaving, a label issue, so many different things. And yet, to your point earlier, they, even with taking hiatus breaks, I mean, the band still perseveres through all of these things. And that's something that was kind of new to me, that they had all of these things that came up against them. And here they are with a double album in 2024. It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's like you look back at it, and like there are several points in the book where it's like things have pulled them apart or knocked them off their path or off their course, or and it's always the music that brings them back together, whether it's Steven's kidnapping, or Jeff going into rehab in the 80s, or how many times, I mean, there are several times in their teens where they were just like, screw it, we want to party, and and we can't find a drummer, and let's just forget it. And yet they just kept coming back together and making music, and yeah, I mean, like, when we started, I mean, that's another cool thing to think about. When we started working on this book, they didn't even have plans to go into the studio and make the Red album. They didn't even have most of those songs.
Wow.
Like I think they'd written Born Innocent for the film, and I think that was all they had. And Stephen had been kind of planting seeds, like, maybe we should, go in and work with, do something with Josh Klinghoffer. And, we started on the project, like officially started doing interviews, I believe, for it either in late December 2022 or early January 2023. I don't think they went into the studio until late like October of 2023. I could have that wrong, but it was definitely
Wow.
in fact, and then it kind of like all of a sudden became this crazed like rush to finish the album, rush to finish the book, and and really like my one regret about this book, which I'm so proud of, and I love those guys so much, and I love this band so much, and I just like to be part of their story, and just the fact that I helped them tell their story is huge for me. But the one thing I really regret was because of that rush at the end, I didn't really get a chance to sit with the Red album because, like, Steven was just like, here's a bunch of files. Like, it wasn't in order, track order. Like, we didn't really have time to go into, like, well, what are these songs about? So that's, and two, I think I felt like I don't want the book to be a press release, or like the last chapter of the book to be a press release for the album. Like, I really just like want it to end like, we have done this album, we're putting it out there, the story continues.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, people like Andrew actually got in touch with me the other day. Like, he's looking for quotes about certain songs for something he's doing to promote the documentary, and it's like I don't have any quotes about specific songs on the Red album because we didn't talk about that. We ran out of time. I ran out of space in the book, and they were in the midst of like trying to get the artwork together, and it was just this, and then we were trying. I mean, really, like the biggest pain in the ass with the book was trying to nail down the photo permissions, and we had somebody at the book company who was supposed to be helping us out with that and dropped the ball, and like all of a sudden we were under the gun, and I think that was the only fight that Stephen and I had the entire project, and which made me feel like, all right, I'm a member of the family now. Like, we yelled at each other. So
Now you're one of them.
Exactly. Now I am one of them. So, but we got it sorted and got it. But like there were like 2 months there, I think like May, June, where it was just like and thankfully we got past that point, and the record's out, the book's more or less out, and rock and roll.
Yeah. No, that record, you're right. It did happen quick. I know that when Steven got in touch with Larry at In the Red, it came out 3 months later.
Right.
Steven wanted it out definitely before the tour, and
I believe that he had approached a couple of other labels about it, ones that they'd had like a more active relationship with, and it was just too quick. Like the other labels just had their release calendar already set, and there was just no way to shoehorn that in. So
yeah. Anyway, hey, I know we're wrapping up here. I think it's interesting, Dan, that your book and Andrew's film were both inspired by Steven doing an interview somewhere.
I don't think I knew that about Andrew's film.
Andrew said he heard Steven talk about the kidnapping story on a Turned Out a Punk podcast.
Oh yeah, great.
And he
great
thought,
episode.
he thought this would be a great film. So very interesting.
Yeah, no, I think the kidnapping. I mean, it's interesting because that's such a horrible story, and Steven still is obviously scarred by it. But it got the documentary going, and I think it's a lot of people have told me that that's a part of the book that really made an impression on them, in part because I think a lot of people still don't know that story.
Yeah.
I think maybe Stephen hadn't spoken about it before that podcast, or at least not
publicly. Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's interesting how that turned out.
Yeah, I had no idea about that whole story prior to this year, so that was something that was definitely new to me. I did want to say, Dan, I really like the format of the book, like how you have it laid out in chapters, and everything is kind of concise within each of those chapters. It made for me as somebody that's not really proficient in reading, even though I have a stack of books here. They're mostly just to hold that shelf together. But it made it. I read it in 3 days,
Right
and
on.
it was just really well put together the way that you laid it out. I thought it was a great format, and
Thank you.
yeah, it
But it's
was.
also a
Yeah,
real page turner, Dan. I mean, that's the
Yeah,
thing. You get in the story, you got to keep going. You just
yeah,
want to, you know, you want
100,
to keep going.
100%.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and they're I can't take too much credit for that because those guys tell great stories. It was just like my job was to translate that to the page. But the other thing is like their career has like it was pretty obvious to me how it should flow
Mhm.
because they have 10 albums. They have, there are other things that happen along the way that slot in between them, like the Love Dolls movies and the Spirit of 76 film and stuff like that. So it was pretty, that was kind of a no-brainer in terms of the organization. The only thing I remember like having an argument with Lee, our agent, because he thought the book should open with like Stephen in the desert after being kidnapped, like this kind of dramatic opening, and I was just like, no. I said we open with the poison tortilla apology note.
oh,
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's I said, it's like is dramatic and interesting as that Stephen story is, it's not really the vibe of the book. And whereas that whole thing with like pranking pranking Poison pranking their own record company or the company that was
Yeah,
about to be their own record company. I mean
yeah.
that is like the most Red Cross story ever. So I just thought like we need to open up with the apology to Poison that they were supposed to write back in the 80s and never did.
that's
And
hilarious.
so it was my idea to like, guys, I think it's time you apologize to Poison, and we'll put it over the image of a tortilla. I did want a color image of a tortilla, but I understand that because of printing costs, we couldn't do that. But still, I got to give props to Omnibus Press for just going, okay, we'll do a picture of a tortilla. Cool.
So, Ronnie, did you have any idea about that story when with that tortilla in, entrance at the
No,
beginning? To
no. I mean, going back with, I dated Kim before the Muffs too, and so I was around Dave Nass's practice space, and that I fell into that crowd kind of when I moved out. I'm saying here when I moved to Los Angeles in 1989. So I knew the prank calling stories. I knew that Jeff found like there's like somebody's phone book he found there, was pranking Lucille Ball and all that kind of stuff on the phone
Right.
as well as crashing her house, as we learned in the book. Um, yeah. But I didn't know. I didn't. I mean, I'm not surprised by any of this, but yeah, pranking like Dan says, pranking your own label at the time
oh my gosh.
and pitting their two big bands against each other. And I know Jeff was a big Striper fan too at the time,
Yeah.
like for real. Like so.
Oh, funny. He didn't admit to that in our
Oh yeah, no,
conversations.
I remember hearing that back then and being a little baffled. Now I understand,
Yeah.
but I was a little baffled by it back then.
So that
Well, my one story that did not make it into the book, I did put it on one of my Substacks, but I will air it out again here, was that a mutual friend of ours, Jim Laspiza,
Yep.
told me years ago that Red Cross had made up a rumor about Neil Diamond,
oh,
just which they knew was false, but they put it out there just to like see if it would travel, and like if somebody else came up to them and be like, "Man, did you hear about Neil Diamond?" and the rumor was, and this is the rumor was that Neil was so debauched and like nothing could get him off anymore except to have members of his crew shit into a big metal salad bowl, and then after the show, like the bowl would be ready for him, and he would put on a pair of like Playtex gloves
Oh
and
my
just like
God.
run it through his
Oh my
fingers to
God.
relax.
Oh
And
my
and so
God.
this is of course stayed with, I think Jim told me this story in like 98 or something like that. So this is of course stayed with me. So of course in the spirit of I can ask these guys anything,
Yeah.
I said, so okay, Jeff, like I've heard this and supposedly the story was, how they put it out there was they claimed that they had a tour bus driver who had been Neil Diamond's tour bus driver, and he told them
Ah.
the story. So that was the whole thing. So I said to Jeff, like, I heard this rumor decades ago that you guys supposedly started. Like, I want you to tell me if this, if you remember anything about this. And Jeff is like, I don't remember that at all, but it sounds like our work.
That's
Yeah,
hilarious.
yeah, yeah.
Because he was like, because like this is something we would have thought about, where it's like, if like we wouldn't have said he ate the shit because then no
Yeah.
one would believe it. But
Yeah.
if we said like, well, he needed this to relax, like that's
Yeah.
just like on the teetering on the edge of possibility that like would make people go, yeah. So yeah, no, and I am a lifelong Neil Diamond fan, and it's
Yeah.
still like I love that story so much.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't believe it's not true. I thought I thought it was true.
And and like I think about when certain like really schmaltzy Neil Diamond songs come on, like September Morn, I just picture him like rolling up, putting the Playtex gloves on and going for it.
And now we'll think that too.
As we should. As we should. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan too. I love Neil
Excellent.
I wanted to add one of the things that to me is so interesting in this book, because it really gets developed from beginning to end, is this very big difference in the characters between Jeff and Steven. And it keeps coming back, and Steven says, but I'm so competitive. He was constantly edging forward. And it seemed like that competitiveness, I see it in the professional realm of how he was really trying to move the band in one way, and Jeff's saying, no, let's go this way. But even with the pranking, like they were really trying to outdo one another with the amount and the extent of the pranks. And they run the gamut. There was no limit.
No, and yeah. And that's a really interesting part of their specific personalities. Jeff is very self-contained in that, like, he's always kind of known what he wants to do. He's always seemed to have known how he wants to interpolate his various influences. And he's also like, from about, I don't know, 1981 on, like around about that time, he just seems to have ceased to care what anyone thought about Red Cross and their music. Just was like, nope, this is how we're going to do it. Whereas Steven was always like, he says so himself, like he was the more conformist of the two.
Mhm.
He would have been happy to like, have the record, have Born Innocent sound more like, an OC hardcore record than it did. He would have, he wanted to be, he wanted to play on the same playing field as these other bands that were getting more recognition
Right.
and respect, and he wanted to beat them at their own game. Whereas Jeff was like, oh, why the fuck would you even care about that?
Right.
And so, which makes for a really interesting dynamic in the band and their relationship in the music, even, and back to Third Eye, like Jeff is, is completely coming from place of acceptance and equanimity about that album, which was just like, I like a lot of it, and it's a moment in time, and yeah, it was stressful, and yeah, we had the wrong guy producing it, and yeah, we lost our drummer halfway through it, and it was, and yeah, I kicked Steven in the balls, but as a record, I still it was interesting too, though, because that was a record where, like, some of the records, when I would kind of go track by track with each of them, and that was one of the records where, like, a handful of songs, Jeff was just like, I have no memory of that song. But whereas, but then Steven is just like, like, that record, it came out a year too early. We blew our chance. It's still affecting us today, blah, blah, blah. In a negative manner. So yeah, it was really fascinating to just see how their respective minds work on all of this. And again, who's to say who's right? And I don't know that if Red Cross had been a band of two, had been formed by two Jeffs or two Stevens, like, I don't know that the band would have been as good or as interesting, or would have certainly wouldn't have lasted this long. So, it's vive la différence.
Absolutely.
Indeed, absolutely. So I think we've proven that regardless of what knowledge anybody has, people need this book, right? So,
Goddamn right, yeah.
so how do people get this book? What's the best way, Dan?
Whoa,
Okay.
whoa.
Yeah. All right. Now,
Sorry.
now we've come to a bit of a minefield. So basically, I don't know when this episode is airing, but as we stand on the day we're recording this, it's been 2 weeks since the book officially was released in the U.S. There was a big screw up, which partly had to do with the dock workers strike, but really was not. It was not the fault of the dock workers. America works best when it says union yes. So I'm not I'm not blaming the dock workers on this. But Amazon and as it's proven, Barnes and Noble, like the two big corporate booksellers, apparently require a really long lead time to get any product into their system. So, because I think some of that has to do with, like, how widespread across America their various warehouses are, how huge those warehouses are, in particular. So supposedly, according to the distributor, like, after the dock workers strike, we were worried that the dock workers strike was going to force us to move the publication date back. We were told, or the book company was told by its U.S. distributor, that once the dock workers strike was settled, there was sufficient time to get the book into the Amazon and Barnes and Noble systems, and that we didn't need to move back the release date. Unfortunately, that did not prove to be the case. Okay. So if you want, so if you normally order from Amazon or Barnes and Noble, if you're listening to this and you want the book, go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble first and see what they have to say. If, as it stands at this very moment that we're recording, if you go to, most people, if they go to Amazon, will see that the book is currently out of stock, and you can order it, but they don't know when it's going to get to you. But I would then recommend going to something like bookshop.org, or going to the site of, your big local indie bookseller, seeing if they've got it there, because lots of indie booksellers do have it in stock, or can special order it for you and get it for you from the distributor quicker than it's going to take to worm its way through the Amazon system. Also, I had just, like, as of Friday, I think it was, I finally got, my box of 50 books in the mail. So if you want to order it directly from me, hit me up on Facebook or Instagram or through my Substack, and if I still have copies, we'll work something out. That's only if you're in the continental U.S. though, because I'm not going to get into the hellscape of international shipping.
No.
But yeah, so it's out there. It just requires a bit of digging. Nobody's trying to keep this from you, Ronnie. And the and the it will of I think as we get closer to Christmas, the books will be in the Amazon system. Also, I know some people who have ordered them from Amazon and received them. I think it just means that the warehouse near them got the books, and somebody keyed it into the system. But I'm in upstate New York. It's still coming up out of stock for me. I know people in LA still coming up out of stock for them.
Okay.
So just either be patient or dig around. But it will be worth the wait. I can promise you that.
Yeah. I ordered the other day from I think it's Thrift Reads or Thrift Books or something, and it was a little cheaper. So
yeah. Well, that's the other thing I would say. Don't go on eBay and spend pay $40 from a seller who's marking it up. Just there are ways to get it for the what is it? It's like $29.95. $29. That's the sticker price. So in the U.S. So don't pay much more than that.
This will all be a distant memory soon, Dan.
Yeah,
exactly. And and that's the thing. It's like, and it's one of these things where it's like, it's out of my hands. I'm just really happy that everyone who has been able to get the book seems to love it, seems to have learned things from it, seems to have deepened their appreciation for Red Cross from reading it, and like that to me is the victory. And like I said, the book will eventually get out there. And I was saying to Stephen, like, it would have been a much bigger bummer if they were in the US right now and we had all these book events lined up,
sure,
and the books weren't there. As it is, they're in they're in Europe and the UK. The book in the UK is already sold out of its first printing and is going into its second, which is a huge success. It was just named one of Rough Trade's music books of the year, which is huge. Yeah. So, it's like, and in the grand scheme of Red Cross, like, this is a pretty minor fuck up. So so I'll take it.
Yeah. If it came out flawless, something would be wrong if it's a Red Cross.
There you go.
Project.
Exactly. And everything else has gone so well for them this year. It's like, all right, I'll take one for the team.
Well, Dan, we really appreciate you coming on. It's an excellent book. I highly recommend it. I know that we've talked about it, Ronnie and Soraya, and I know that you guys agree with me. So even if you've seen the documentary, there's a lot in here. It's considered a companion piece, some people have said. So definitely go out and get this book. So Now You're One of Us, The Incredible Story of Red Cross by Dan Epstein. Thank you so much for writing it, for all that you've shared with us. And
thank you so much for having me on. This has been an absolute blast, and I really appreciate your support for the book.
We love it.
And there's also some Paisley Underground. Some
references
in here. All right, folks.
Yeah. There's definitely, they were, as Jeff says, we were Paisley Underground adjacent. Yeah. So you get some of those characters show up in here as well, including a long overdue apology to Michael Quercia. So
Your
Red Cross is everything adjacent, everybody. So
yes, that's true.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks so much.
See y'all. Have a great day.
Take care.
All right.
All right. I'll say it. This book really helps in understanding the complete story. These two brothers, I think, were well ahead of their time. And so you see that struggle of wanting to produce these albums, this music, and sometimes it just didn't jive with what was going in the market. But I mean, like, there are a lot of bands that are name dropped in here, but one of the best stories is the whole Guns N' Roses
Oh yeah.
experience in this book, and you just go, "Holy crap!" The LA scene at that time, and the push towards metal and heavier rock, and then you see Red Cross, and you see Steven. Like, I can feel his frustration going, uh, "I'm very competitive, and I want more."
Yeah.
Or the Poison story, or name it. And then the whole prank with Courtney Love. I mean, that's chef's kiss. But
The,
I
the
mean,
pranking, as we talked about, the pranking's legendary. And yeah, with Guns N' Roses saying, "Well, we're not going to open." They had similar thing happen with Jane's Addiction too. Um,
Oh.
yeah, which is not
yeah.
addressed in the book. Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's like I said after the we did the thing with Andrew. Like a great band is or people you want to hang out with. In this book, you're hanging out with Jeff and Steve, and it's a blast.
So, Ronnie, I had to ask because it's brought up in the book that all ex Red Cross members have stories about these two butting heads. And
Yes,
as a good friend of Roy McDonald, Ronnie, have you heard
yeah,
any stories from him that you could share, that you feel comfortable sharing with our audience about?
yeah. I probably shouldn't share them, but yes, yes.
All right, fair enough,
Like
fair enough.
yeah, yeah, like in the movie when Victor's like kind of causes them to go, like they're fighting too much. I can't take this. I mean, they're brothers, and they would fight, and they do address this a bit in the book, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, they would fight, and sometimes they get physical, and
Stephen got kicked in the balls. I
There
mean,
you
well, there's
go.
that story, yeah, 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 but yeah, and I, I'll just say that it wasn't necessarily just when they're younger, so
yeah.
but
So
hey,
now let me
it's
ask
that
the two of
dynamic.
you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you agree with Dan's assessment? The latest album, the Red album, one of the best that they've released?
My opinion, as Ronnie is being diplomatic about his answer, I think it would make a great single album. And I know that other people have said that too. But I put that out there and then it came back that it's a great double album. So for me, I think it would have made a great single album. I think half of it is amazing.
I'm not going to go there. I think it's a great double album, but yeah, I don't want to pick a favorite here.
Got it.
It's amazing that it got done. I want to give a lot of credit to Josh Klingenhofer, the producer, for getting that record out of them. I mean, the record is mainly the three of them. Like,
Yeah.
Dale doesn't play on the record. I don't think Jason plays much on the record.
I think they said that he just flew in for a couple
Yeah.
couple tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and as we learn in the book, it's not always a easy thing, or it's generally not an easy thing when those guys are making records. You know, just and that happens with everybody, every band probably. Just differences of opinions and way to do things, and you're having to work with people, the technical people, and all that. And yeah, a lot of credit to Josh, who I don't know, but a lot of credit, Josh, for getting that done. Yeah, and it's amazing the fact that they have a double record. If that's, I think Jeff says that at the end of the book. Like it's incredible at this stage of their career.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
What other band? I think they said what other band that's been around for 40 years has a double album at
yeah,
this point in their career, right?
yeah.
And that's
So
absolutely true. For the record, recovering the blues is my favorite. So
researching.
researching the
You,
blues.
you
Researching.
you don't even know the title.
I
It's
don't
your
even know the
favorite. I'm
title.
just kidding. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
What about
Researching the
you,
blues.
Ronnie? Favorite
Neurotica.
album?
Neurotica. Yeah.
There you go.
Yep. But I mean, there. I hate this favorite thing. I hate the
Yeah.
Facebook groups where it's like, walk away Renee versus whatever. Like, I hate that stuff.
It's
I hate
fun.
lists. I
Yeah.
hate like song battles.
Yeah.
You can like,
It's ridiculous, but it's fun.
yes, yeah, yeah,
It is it's absolutely ridiculous.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't need to pick a favorite. You can like this one this day and that one the other day, and whatever. So
Soraya, do you have a favorite or are you
Not yet, because my knowledge was limited,
Yeah.
and so I
Yeah.
knew a couple of albums, but now I want to go through the whole thing. I want to do a Jeff Brenneman like start to finish chronological order. Um, because I appreciate the music a lot more now that I have this background in this story.
Me too.
And I just love this dynamic of the two of them, and they're constantly pushing each other, artistically. And I like that. And you got to appreciate the band for what it is. And what they do is pretty inventive stuff, really creative. And like Dan said, Jeff's attitude was, I really don't care what
Yeah.
they think about me. I just know that I want to do this. And I listen to the music now a little differently with that in mind, just going, uh, he wasn't guided by anything other than himself.
No,
How
no,
can
it'll be
you not love
interesting.
that?
It'll be interesting to for you to take it all in retrospect, as a lot of people will be doing that will be
Yeah.
discovering the band from this book and the movie.
And
So
it's well deserved. Well deserved. These two guys. And again, I go back to my comment when I saw the documentary. I don't know what's in the water in Hawthorne, but Hawthorne gave birth to a lot of fun, cool musicians, creative people. I'm here for all of it.
yeah. So we'll check in after you hear Born Innocent, Soraya, and see what you
Yeah.
think.
Okay. You'll get my very bizarre opinion
Yeah.
about it all way after the fact, but I'm done. I'm good.
This has been fun tackling Red Cross with you guys.
Red Cross Army.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, all the tater tots chapter 2.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's a Bill Bartell.
Your
Yeah.
buddy. All right, Soraya, you want to lead us out?
All right, mi gente, agruviar.
Groove on, Paisley people. Ronnie?
How
Yeah.
about you?
Yeah, baby.
Yeah. I
I
love
don't know.
it.
I'll come up with something one of these days.
Hey, gang.
Hey,
Hey,
how's it going?
Good. Lovely to see you all.
there he is.
Yes.
Good to see you, Dan. It's been a long time.
Way too long, Ronnie.
I know. I know we keep in touch virtually, but
Yeah, no, it's life seems to be agreeing with you in your new digs.
yeah. Well, it can't help but take a while. It's been I'm
Yeah.
at like the 2 month mark now, and it's radically different. Not
Yes.
just the town, but just the
Sure, life.
anyway life. But
Eh,
no one's yelling on the street, or no one's tagging the alley. Uh,
That's good. That's you. That's up to you, man.
no no helicopters.
Oh,
Um,
that's great.
yeah.
You don't have
Anyway,
kids doing donuts in the middle of your street flying
no, no,
down the
no. I
hill?
I live in a house with a dishwasher, and you can turn on the
Hey,
water.
hey, that's no way to speak of Julie.
Right?